Let's talk honestly for a second. If you're thinking about moving to Richmond, you're probably feeling two things at the same time. First, the city looks incredible online. The food scene, the river, historic neighborhoods, breweries, festivals, all of it. But second, the more research you do, the more confusing it gets. One video says West Hampton is the place to be. Another says Fulton Hill is where everyone's moving. Someone else tells you to skip the city and go straight to Mannequin Sabbath or Montpelier. And after a while, it starts to feel like everyone's describing a completely different Richmond. Here's the reason for that. Richmond isn't a checklist city. It's a lifestyle city. Two people can move here, live 10 minutes apart, and have completely different day-to-day experiences. I've watched people come to visit Richmond for a weekend and fall in love immediately. They spend a Saturday walking through Libyan Grove, grab a coffee, check out the shops, maybe head down to the river. And by Sunday, they're already picturing themselves living here. And I've also seen people move here, buy a house in a neighborhood they researched for months. And 6 months later, they still feel like something doesn't quite click. Same city, totally different outcome. Most of the time, the issue isn't the house. It's that they started the search in the wrong place. Because Richmond will give you a lot of different ways to live. You can live somewhere busy and walkable, where something is always going on. You can live somewhere quiet, where you pull into your driveway and unwind the second you get home. You can live somewhere in the middle, where you're close to everything, but life feels a little calmer. All of those exist here. But if you start your search the way most people do, by chasing the best neighborhood, it's very easy to land somewhere that looks right, but doesn't actually fit your life. So, in this video, I want to show you how people who end up loving their move to Richmond actually choose where to live. And it usually starts in a place most buyers skip. When I first started helping people relocate to Richmond, I approached it the way most agents do. We started with neighborhoods, maps, boundaries, list of good areas, and technically it worked. People bought houses that they loved, but over time I started hearing the same comment during follow-up conversations. Not complaints, just something subtle. I love the house. I just don't feel settled yet. That sentence came up a time or two, and then I realized what was happening. We were starting with location labels instead of how people actually live day to day. And Richmond doesn't really reward that approach. What makes the biggest difference here is your routine, what time you get home, what you like doing on weeknights, whether you enjoy being around activity or prefer things a little quieter. For example, some people are completely fine circling for parking in the museum district on a Saturday afternoon. Other people would rather pull into their driveway, walk inside, and be done for the night. Neither one is better, but they lead to very different living experiences. Once you start looking at Richmond through that lens, the city becomes much easier to understand. So, before we talk about specific neighborhoods or areas, we need to start with something more important, lifestyle. Because once that piece is clear, the rest of the decision becomes a lot simpler. Lifestyle is the biggest factor people underestimate when choosing where to live in Richmond. Most buyers start by asking, where should I live? But a better question is, how do I actually live during a normal week? Because Richmond will absolutely let you buy a great house in a well-known neighborhood and still feel slightly out of place if the lifestyle doesn't match your routine. Many places here close earlier than people expect. Weeknights can feel quieter than big cities, and that rhythm works really well for some people, but not everyone. Once we adjusted the search around their actual schedule instead of neighborhood name, their options changed quickly, and the decision became much clearer. This is what starting with lifestyle looks like. You think about things like, what does a Tuesday night look like for you? Do you want to grab dinner somewhere nearby after work? Or are you usually heading straight home? Are weekends about walking the river trails and exploring the city? Or are they more about relaxing at home and enjoying a quieter pace? Richmond supports all of those lifestyles, but starting with how you live, not where you think you should live, makes the decision much easier. When buyers skip that step, they often end up chasing neighborhoods that look good online instead of places that actually fit their routine. And if you're planning a move to Richmond and trying to figure out which lifestyle actually fits you here, that's exactly the kind of conversation I have with relocation clients all the time. I help people walk through their routines, commute, and priorities so they don't end up choosing the right house in the wrong place. If you want help thinking through that before you start touring homes, you can call, text, or email me anytime or grab a time on my calendar. All of my contact information is in the description below. Here's where a lot of relocation buyers get tripped up. They do exactly what you're supposed to do. They research, they read articles, they watch videos, they scroll Reddit threads, and somehow they end up more confused than when they started. That's because most online advice about Richmond focuses on reputation, not daily life. Algorithms love bold opinions. Rankings love simple answers. So you end up seeing the same neighborhood names repeated over and over and over again. Scott's Addition gets described like it's always buzzing. The Fan gets presented as the perfect walkable neighborhood, but what rarely gets mentioned is how much the experience can vary depending on things like your schedule, your routine, and even which block you're on. For example, someone who loves being around restaurants and activity might really enjoy living near West Broad Village or Greengate, but someone else might visit on a Saturday afternoon, see how busy it is, and realize they'd prefer something quieter. Neither person is wrong. They just want different experiences. That's why advice without context can be misleading. Richmond is a metro area where small differences matter. Two people can live 10 minutes apart and have completely different lifestyles. One person might spend the evenings walking the James River trails. Another might prefer quiet evenings at home. Both of those lifestyles work here, but choosing the right place starts with understanding what matters to you, not what's trending online. So, quick question for you. Are you more drawn to energy, balance, or quiet when it comes to where you live? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and it helps shape what we cover in future videos. Because once you stop chasing reputation and start focusing on lifestyle, another important factor becomes much easier to see. There's one question almost every relocation buyer asks at some point. What's the best neighborhood in Richmond? It sounds like a logical question, but it usually leads people in the wrong direction, because the idea of a single best neighborhood assumes everyone wants the same things. And in Richmond, that's rarely true. Some people value walkability. Some prioritize space. Some want quiet evenings. Others want to be close to activity. Those priorities shape the experience far more than the neighborhood name itself. I've seen buyers fall in love with the idea of a neighborhood, the architecture, the reputation, the photos online, only to realize later that their routine doesn't really match it. Maybe the area feels perfect on weekends, but busier than expected during the week. Or maybe the opposite happens. They think they want constant activity, but after a few months, they realize they prefer a little more space and quiet. That's not a neighborhood problem. It's just a matter of priorities. A better question to ask is this: what am I willing to trade off, and what matters most to me? One thing that surprises people about Richmond is how commute times actually feel during the week. On paper, most commutes here don't look very long, but the experience can vary depending on the route and time of day. Certain corridors like 95, 64, or river crossings can become busier during peak hours. So a drive that feels quick on a Saturday afternoon might take longer than that during the weekday morning rush. That's why many local buyers think less about distance and more about consistency. A predictable 25-minute commute often feels easier than a drive that sometimes takes 15 minutes and sometimes takes 40. I've had buyers compare routes from different parts of the metro and realize that a slightly longer drive with fewer variables actually feels more manageable day to day. Once buyers start thinking about their commute rhythm instead of just distance, it helps narrow the search even more. Here's something that surprises a lot of buyers. Within the same neighborhood, the day-to-day experience can feel very different depending on the type type of homes and price points nearby. In some areas, you'll see more turnover, people moving in and out, different neighbors each year, more rental activity. That can create a lively environment where things feel active and social. In other parts of the same neighborhood, you might notice more long-term homeowners and a quieter atmosphere. Same neighborhood name, different daily rhythm. That's why you'll sometimes hear very different opinions about the exact same area. One person might describe it as an energetic and lively place. Another might say it feels calm and residential. They're both describing real experiences just from different parts of the neighborhood. This is another reason visiting areas at different times of day can be helpful. The atmosphere during a weekday evening might feel very different from a weekend afternoon, and paying attention to those differences can help you decide what type of environment feels right for you. One thing I've noticed about buyers who feel really confident in their decision is that they develop a clear filter early in the process. Instead of touring a dozen of homes hoping one stands out, they narrow their search based on what matters most to them. That might include things like commute patterns, lifestyle preferences, housing style, access to certain amenities. Once those priorities are clear, it becomes much easier to recognize when a home fits or when it doesn't. Sometimes buyers walk into a house and immediately know it's not right because it doesn't align with their routine. Other times, they visit an area and realize it matches their lifestyle perfectly. That clarity saves time and removes a lot of second guessing. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by options, the search becomes more focused, and that leads to one final step before making a decision. Before making an offer, many confident buyers do one simple thing. They imagine their normal week in that location, not the highlight version, the regular version. A Tuesday evening after work, a Thursday morning getting ready for the day, a Sunday evening winding down before the week starts. They think about practical details like where they'll park, how the street feels at night, how long everyday errands might take. Sometimes buyers even visit the area at different times to get a better sense of the environment. Those small observations help confirm whether the location feels comfortable and practical for daily life. When everything lines up, the decision often feels surprisingly calm, not rushed, not uncertain, just clear, and that's usually a good sign. Moving to Richmond isn't complicated, but choosing the right place to live here works best when you start with lifestyle instead of labels. The buyers who feel happiest with their move usually follow the same general process. They think about their routine first. They focus on what matters most to them. They consider commute patterns. They pay attention to how different areas feel during everyday life. And they take the time to make sure everything aligns before committing. If you're planning to move to Richmond and want help navigating that process, I work with relocation buyers here every week. You can call, text, or email me anytime or grab a time on my calendar. All of my contact information is in the description below.